Welcome to Dreaming in Color. I'm Richard Navy from A Hollywood Reporter, and today we have two of the stars from HBO's Lovecraft Country, Journey Smollett and Jonathan Majors. Thank you both for being here today.
Peace.
Thank you for having us.
First, just to give viewers a little context about the show, Lovecraft Country was created by Misha Green, and it's based on Matt Ruff's 2016 novel of the same name. The series explores the horrors of racial injustice and the supernatural through the eyes of several Black families in 1950s America. Journey, the first question is for you. You worked with Misha Green previously on Underground, and you have a history of activism. So I'm curious about what appealed to you in terms of working on Lovecraft Country and taking on Letty's fighting spirit.
Yeah, our previous collaboration, Underground, had just been canceled, and Misha went off to write the pilot for Lovecraft Country, and what felt like 3 weeks later, had the script. But I was struck by the audacity, to show Black folks in such a light, centering so many different Black voices in a genre we've been historically shut out from. Misha was using the genre as a lens to tell our story, illuminating all our different hues, our colors, our joys, our tragedies, our struggles, our triumphs. She was using the genre in a way that felt disruptive, yet not performative. It didn't feel like, all right, here's a message. It just felt honest. And it felt like, wow, this is a radical reimagining. And I was like, wait, we get to fight racist sheriffs and monsters? But then, you ask about, taking on Letty's fighter spirit, I think you said. For me, yes. I don't know. I didn't really look at it in that way. For me, I more so wanted to inspect what was underneath all that fight. That intrigued me. For her, it's survive or die. And I remember speaking with Misha a lot about just inspecting her outward and inward struggles. You might call them her contradictions. She's in full command of her sexuality, and yet she's a virgin. She's in need of putting together this tribe with her artist friends and her sister, but yet historically rejects her own blood. She believes in serving the community, but will ultimately choose put herself first. And so those were some of the themes that I was drawn to. In addition to, I don't know, there's this thing, like she's this woman with just too much energy, too much curiosity, too much force, and brokenness to remain so confined, to these like socially acceptable ways of behaving. I wanted to know, well, okay, how does someone in 1955 navigate that? Especially when the feminine model of what's socially acceptable doesn't fit for her. The masculine model don't fit for her either, So where does that leave someone like Letty? So those are some of the things that I was just really drawn to. It felt like, I was called to play and I had no other choice.
Jonathan, for you, I think there's a certain weight that comes with being a Black male hero, and I think the series disposes of some of those preconceived notions. So I'm curious about your process of finding Atticus through this idea of Black masculinity.
He was the archetypical hero, being a soldier. He actually went and did the thing that all the books and all the Greeks and all the Shakespeares and all the August Wilsons write about. The classical idea of the heroism. He did it, However, he had things lined up against him. And because of that, all the tropes and all the trappings of what it is to be a hero, and furthermore, what it is to be a Black man, he got to fully embody those things and then expand them, So I think with Atticus, he carries a burden of that Black masculinity of the hero, but he continues to use that archetype, use the vehicle of the archetype to expand it. He's a bibliophile, he is a family man, he is a protector. He doesn't do the things that society would say he should do. Again, you can't just judge a book by its cover, no pun intended. You see what he looks like, but then you don't know what the chapters are inside of him, how he operates, how he thinks, how he moves. And that's the blessing of the piece, that, every episode you get a little piece of every character, including Atticus, and you see what he's made out of, and you see why he behaves the way he behaves. And yes, it is masculine. Yes, it is Black, and because it's so Black and so masculine, it becomes very universal.
For both of you, I'm curious about how you saw the events of the Tulsa Massacre, which we see later in the season, impacting the series' themes of historical awareness.
In telling, the story of the Tulsa Massacre, they couldn't call it a massacre because massacres, there has to be reparations in a massacre. If it was a massacre, then that's the government. You got to go in there and there's things to be repaid in a riot, right? Which it was labeled by the society. There is no payback, and so that was interesting for me.
The thing is, it's tough though, because it's not just Tulsa, it's Rosewood, it's the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing, it's Charleston, South Carolina church shooting, you can't really quantify the impact that these sort of events have had on the survivors, right? To be Black and brown in this nation means that someone in your lineage has either had to bear witness or had to survive in some capacity events like these, and that memory, that's in your DNA. You look at someone like Montrose, played by the brilliant, Michael K. Williams. Montrose is so broken, he's a broken man, and his brokenness, his unprocessed trauma and grief, I don't know, man, it manifests in several ways, and one of them being, the violent upbringing of his son, Atticus. Violence begets violence. And we just tapped on Tulsa, but one thing that I, in just kind of like engaging in like the social media and stuff like that, I was really encouraged by the dialogue, that was stemming from the work. Seeing the conversations online and social media, and folks are like sharing articles or Wikipedia facts, right, about some of the historical references made in Lovecraft Country. Like that's what that means so much to me, because it feels like, I don't know, maybe we're a part of this growing dialogue, this growing movement to reclaim our narrative.
These historical events that happen are not just historical events. They are events that happen to people in history. And because of that, they have a very immediate impact on those who are involved, and those people who were impacted then have an impact on those who weren't involved. And so all these moments are connected. And so to experience that was more than just a book education. It was a visceral, emotional, and as Jenny said, ancestral education as well.
As much as Lovecraft Country is a reflection and acknowledgement of Black history, part of the success of the show, I think, is that it shows Black people doing things that we don't get to see often enough in media, fighting monsters, traveling through time, performing exorcisms. So, Journey, for you, in my opinion, the history of horror is a history of strong women, but I don't think often enough it's Black women. But from the get-go, we get to see, Letty covered in blood, running to save the lives of her family. It really opened up a place in the genre for Black women. So was that something that you were conscious of when you were, taking on the role and battling these monsters throughout the show?
To be honest, when you're in it, you're conscious of just doing the work, right? But you make a good point. As a Black female creative, I've always loved this genre. But for years, I told my reps, don't you dare send me another horror movie, because I'm not going to be the Black chick killed in the first half. It's a real sad reality to have to settle for. Why must we, as Black or brown artists, have to be collateral damage of your weak ass plot? Why can't you just give this character a want, a need, a desire, put an obstacle in her way, and based on whatever the truthful characterizations and background that you've given her, Let's watch and see what she does. I mean, it's literally that simple, you know, but for too long, we've just been left with these lazy ass or racist narratives in which, you know, our characters are so passive and everything's happening around them and decisions are being made for them and they have no real agency or choice. You've essentially made them dead, whether you killed them or not, you know? And as Black women, you know, I believe we are the spine of our nation. You know, we've been on the front lines of change, holding down the family, uplifting the community, surviving against real life monsters, you know, on our knees, praying for our loved ones morning and night, making flawed choices. These are the women I know. So no, I can't say I was conscious while we were filming of like, oh, Letty's gonna, you know, be groundbreaking. I mean, no, I mean, yeah, I hope Letty adds to the bigger conversation, but I was just focused on telling the truth of who we are as Black women. That was my target.
Jonathan, for you, I'm curious about your thoughts in terms of, you know, H.P. Lovecraft, whose namesake is the show, you know, and he was known for the racism within his works. And Atticus acknowledges this fact early on. But, you know, for you as a Black actor, was starring in a show with, you know, Lovecraft's namesake, did it feel like it reclaimed something in that genre space, you know, for Black people in general?
What does Booker T. Washington say? I will not allow my soul to be belittled by hating a man, right? Something like that. That is the bearing and the dignity of what it is to be any member of any minority group, right? That the second you allow hate to enter into your heart, you essentially cut yourself off from creation and creating things. And like our ancestors did, you know, by taking, you know, the guts of the pig and the feet of the pig and all this sort of and making soul food, right? From what they gave us, you know, we made that and we survived. We took those throwaways, we took that manifestation of depravity and built families, you know, built careers, built lives, made it to where we are now, you know, literally where the three of us are now. We are the byproduct of that. And so to the point of, you know, H.P. Lovecraft, yeah, Atticus understands that. And I personally understood that, you know, coming in and saying, okay, cool, this is what we're dealing with. But I got news for you. We also live in America, you see. And so the same betrayal that Atticus experiences in thinking that, oh, here's this writer that I love and appreciate, ain't got no love for me, you know, that is very similar to the moment James Baldwin says this, every young Black child, and I would say every group of minority will come up against, you know, realizing that a place and a thing, a book or a country that you love does not necessarily have your best interests at heart. So then what do we do about it? As Journey said, we're survivors. You take that, right, and you figure out where you fit in, right? And then you blow it up and you make space and you reprive it and you take the good part of it, right? And you dismiss the bad part of it and you make what that was better. And by doing that, you completely subvert it, right? You own it, right? Yeah, and I think that's what myself and the cast did, and Misha, and taking this on, you know, and me personally, that was just it wasn't an objective in any way, but I did understand the gravity of the situation and what the chemistry of it was.
In broader terms, I'm curious about both of your thoughts on how seeing Black people, you know, be they women or men or queer, as heroes within our fiction, and how that impacts our ability to see ourselves in this ongoing fight for social justice, particularly in America right now.
I guess this is what I think. You know, art is essential, right? We see during COVID, right? Like it's essential. It's essential to the survival of humanity. Representation in art matters. You know, I look at my son, I look at my niece, and they observe their world around them and then reenact what they see, right? Yet, how can they be what they cannot see? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's a constant struggle for me as a mother, as an auntie, to be like, okay, I gotta like find the new book or the new cartoon to like, put in front of them so that they can dream and see like, oh, see, she's a doctor. She could be, Nyla, you could be a doctor. And so, yeah, I think in the broader terms, I think it's important to see us being not just heroes, but see us being flawed, see us stumbling and getting back up, seeing us trekking along, seeing us being just people, not these flat, one-dimensional, two-dimensional of that, characters that sometimes the writers tend to fall back to. So I think it's quite vital, and I'm very encouraged because there's so many folks behind the cameras just writing really interesting, vastly different art for us, by us. And so I'm quite excited about that.
For us, by us. You just reference Fugo?
I did.
I just want to be clear. That's what happened. Okay, I'm sorry. Didn't mean to interrupt.
Jonathan, yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well.
Why it's important to show truthfully other folks, other people, Black people, in all their forms, is because that adds to the blanket of our culture at large. And once we do that, shit kind of settles out, So what we end up doing is not just allowing other folks to see us the way we are, but we allow ourselves, as she said, to see us as we are, which then emboldens us as a culture to grow and to expand, and to not just keep that in the house or keep that on the stage or keep that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can then live and behave fully. That's what the artists do, right? We give permission in many ways for people to feel and to experience things in the day-to-day.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the Black Lives Matter movement in the context of Lovecraft Country, because over the course of this season, I saw a lot of pieces and a lot of parallels drawn between the events of this year and the show. Did those events in any way inform what you hope audiences take away from the series?
It's that's always a tricky question for me. I never really know how to answer because I tend to, not really have like real expectations or want to like dictate to the audience, what or how the work should affect them. It's art. Art affects us all in just such vastly different ways, To speak to your point about Lovecraft containing, parallels, Tick is standing right outside Letty's house, and the police essentially are, it's unfortunate, but it's a parallel to many of our brothers and sisters that we've lost. And that real panic that Letty feels when she sees that gun being pointed at this man that she loves. Like, how many families are gonna have to feel that? How many George Floyds or Breonna Taylors or Casey Goodsons are going to have to perish before the world is consistently as horrified as we are, because that's a horror we have to live with, beyond this obligatory social media post or the freaking black squares or, it's just, it's quite maddening. But again, I'm encouraged because I feel like as artists, what does Nina Simone say? It's your job to reflect the times, right? And so if Lovecraft contributes to the dialogue or expands the perspective of folks, then we will have done our jobs.
I would say, or I would quote, history doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. Lovecraft Country, I felt, contributed to the protests. And as protests were raging, the show was airing every Sunday, and there was conversations to be had, in the streets. I wouldn't say in the barbershops, because he was also dealing with COVID and shit. But within families, those conversations are being had. So it's encouraging, it's encouraging. We were, and continue to be, Jerry and I, a part of the protest, a part of the movement, you know, and that movement is for what? Justice, equality, peace, love, etc. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, we continue. I mean, we're doing this now. Dreaming in Color. This whole thing is a part of that thrust. We don't necessarily have to check our history books anymore. Just stay present, you know, and change the now.
I'd like to talk a little bit about inclusivity in the industry. And so for both of you, you know, you have exciting projects coming up in the future. Journey, you already had Birds of Prey released this year, which was great. And you have Spiderhead coming out in the future. And then Jonathan, you have Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, where you'll be playing Kang in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So, you know, playing these characters, especially in terms of the comic book characters who are traditionally depicted as white, you know, do you see that inclusivity changing in Hollywood in terms of the roles that you're offered or looked at?
The minds of the, it's so shitty to say, but gatekeepers has been expanded. However, it has only been expanded, I feel, because of certain phenomena, certain things that occurred because of artists of color, Black artists breaking the mold. That of Get Out, that of Black Panther, etc. Those two movies completely shook the minds and the algorithms of what these, what would I say, the oligarchy of Hollywood has set up, right? And so it's been expanded. Now, the beauty of it is that it made room for that beautiful list of creators Journey just made, named, to come in and to expand it and to burst it and break it, right? That type of emboldenment is encouraging, you know, and the more we continue to talk like we're talking now, the more we continue to express ourselves on film, right, in television, on stage, as full human beings, and refuse to play the archetypes, right? Refuse to give a stereotypical reading. You know, we as creators, the more we challenge them to meet us on the field, the more we challenge them to expand the narrative.
What I am seeing shift is supply and demand. You know, the audiences are demanding it. They're demanding that art reflect the way the world actually looks. They're demanding that they see themselves in these projects. They're demanding that, hey, if you won't make a TV show and it takes place in New York, damn it, it better look like New York, okay? And so I'm very encouraged by it, but I'm also, you know, again, I'm just encouraged by the folks who just aren't waiting for that. You know, the folks who, the writers, the directors, the producers, the artists, you know, these creatives who are just writing dope stories, you know. I cannot wait to see The Harder They Fall. Like, the idea of an all Black Western, you know, that Jonathan's doing. It's just incredibly thrilling and exciting to see what Jonathan and James Samuel and Idris and the whole gang, you know, are creating. But, so, you know, James had to think of that, right? You know, like, and then he had to get the folks who believed in what this idea that he had in his mind. So there's just way more folks who were just like, you know what, we're not gonna like just kind of keep asking for them to open the door. We're just gonna like go over here and do our own thing. And if they catch up, cool. If not, cool, because we're doing our own thing. You know, you got the Jordan Peels, the Misha Greens, the Nia DaCostas, the Ava DuVernays, the Gina Prince Bythewoods. These are folks who are just, they're doing their own thing, you know, and we all as artists get to benefit from that, because it's really expanding the gaze and just changing the narrative and reclaiming our narrative, which is very encouraging.
Fantastic. Well, thank you guys both for being here, and thank you for your responses. This was a great conversation.
Thanks, bro.